If you have employees, even one, this video is for you. So I didn't expect this series to be just like compliance updates, but I did receive another update in my inbox that I thought was super important to talk about. And this is about the dreaded I-9s. So what's an I-9? An I-9 is how businesses determine whether somebody is able to work in the United States or not, and in turn able to work for their company. Because if you aren't legally able to work in the United States, you shouldn't be working for a company in the United States. That's what the I-9 states. So it kind of puts the burden on the employer to make that good faith, educated thumbs up that this person is who they say they are. I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on that, but let's save that for later. So let me tell you what's going on. I got an email update from SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resources Management, a super secret HR society. Not really. It's one of our only resources, really. A lot of opinions on that as well. But so I got an email update from them that ICE quietly updated their I-9 inspection fact sheet. Interesting, isn't that? For years, violations on I-9s were split into two buckets. So substantive, which were serious, immediate penalties, and then technical and procedural, which could be corrected within a 10-day window. So that 10-day grace period, it no longer applies to multiple common mistakes. And that's where the change is happening. And so what does that mean for you as a business? That means that if you have these common mistakes, you just could be subject to heftier fines. So really, what is it always about? It's all about money, guys. And so my job is really to educate you and, help guide and protect your business, and so that you're not spending thousands and thousands of dollars in fines that just could have been easily fixed. So unfortunately, this is federal law. If you have employees, it applies to every single business. There isn't like an employee cap. I-9s have to be filled out within the first 3 days of employment. So if you have somebody start, their start date is number 1, and you need that I-9 signed off on within those first 3 days. That means the employee has to complete their section, and the employer has to verify their identification and complete their section. And not only do you have to complete it, but it has to be done correctly. I've seen mistakes happen so many times because obviously it's super easy to make mistakes on these types of things. I've seen, if somebody provides you, let's say, a driver's license, mixing up where you put like the expiration date versus the document number, super common mistake, but that could cost you so much money. So my advice to everybody is making sure you're doing this in a timely manner, and also paying really close attention to make sure you're filling these out correctly. So let's talk a little bit more about the violations there. What's considered a substantive violation? So missing the date of birth or date of hire, forgetting to date Section 1, where the employee fills out their information, or Section 2, where the employer fills out their information. I have seen this happen so many times. It is so common to miss the date. And unfortunately, that can cost you. So again, make sure you're really paying attention as you fill that out. And again, this is for the paper I-9s. There are alternative options. If you have a preparer or a translator that's assisting in this process, if that's left incomplete, that can also cost you. Missing an employee or employer or authorized representative title. So let's say you're the business owner and you're signing off on the I-9s. You need to have your title there along with your name. So make sure you're adding that. Failure to enter a rehire date. If you are rehiring someone, you will just add that to their current I-9. Remote verification errors, which are sometimes way easier to happen than you'd think. And electronic I-9 software that doesn't meet ICE's documentation standards. So those are the things that have changed that no longer have a grace period, and they're really simple and easy mistakes. Unfortunately, you don't get a warning for these things. You just get a fine. And these aren't mistakes that only big corporations make. These are mistakes that every size business makes, every manager, business owner, founder. It's admin gaps that really happen on any size team. Especially if you're dealing with like a high influx of people. Let's say you have a brick and mortar, like a cafe or a retail store where you maybe have like more of an in and out of employees, or a nightclub. You have to make sure that your onboarding process is really tightened up so that the person that's verifying those I-9s knows exactly what they need to do to avoid any sort of mess like this. I always recommend that, you use an HRIS system for this type of stuff. They store it compliantly. They verify them compliantly. E-Verify is another amazing option that you can sign up for. It will verify the person's identity based on public records. And so that is just like an extra helpful check on everything. Especially if you have remote employees. So, the process does change for that. When I work with clients, I always recommend, if they already have employees, my first step is doing an HR audit with them. And this is absolutely one of the things I take a look at. So digging through I-9s, making sure they're filled out correctly. If they are not filled out correctly, you have to go back in, correct them, and then date it with the correction. So make sure that you're auditing your files, that you are making those corrections. And I know it is sometimes difficult to get people to be compliant with filling out this information within 3 days, but it is incredibly important that you are compliant with that. So please make sure you remember that. The person that's signing off on the I-9 should be a company representative. So if you have like a manager of a location, have them do it. If you're big enough to have an HR department, the HR department should be doing it. If you're a business owner with, let's say, 5 employees, you're the one that's doing it then. But make sure you have a designated person whose responsibility it is. And that's a person that's going to be there in person with the employee so they can verify that identity. There's also rules for how you store I-9. So if you are doing it through a platform, a payroll HRIS platform, they generally, I don't want to speak for all of them, but the ones that I've worked with, like a Gusto, a Rippling, an ADP, they compliantly store those within their system. If you aren't using something like that and you're doing paper files, have a separate binder for your I-9s that only have the I-9s in that binder. Make sure the I-9s are stored separately from the rest of the employee files. This makes it super easy to just grab them in case something happens, in case there's an audit. Now, I will share that like 10 years ago, I would always hear about like the I-9 audit, and it was always this lore in HR that, it was pressure on our shoulders, but I never experienced one. I never knew anyone that actually experienced one, but things have changed. And with the government really cracking down on immigration, these things are becoming more and more regular. The I-9 audits, as well as the contractor versus employee, which I talked about last time in my last video. If you didn't watch that, I highly recommend it. But these are 2 of the hottest button items that could be so costly to a small business, like really, truly detrimental. So make sure that you're being compliant with these types of things. I know sometimes they sound silly. I know they're a pain in the ass. Trust me, I know it's difficult to make sure employees are providing you with the correct documentation. That's the other part of it. You need to make sure they're providing you with the right documentation. There are three lists. There's A, B, and C. If you get documentation from list A, it's a one and done. That would be like a passport, a green card. B and C need to be completed together. So you need one from each column. B, generally what I see is like a driver's license, and C, a birth certificate. But the I-9 does list out which documents are acceptable in those. So make sure that if your employee gives you that driver's license, that they have something else to back it up from column C. This is another common mistake I see a lot. So make sure that you have your point person, right? The person that's responsible for signing off on those I-9s within your business. And then also make sure that they understand the rules and regulations, they understand how to properly fill it out, and that they're really owning that process. I think it's really helpful to make sure that people have their, marching orders, like they know what they're doing so that they can really own that and make sure everything's complete. If they're out, make sure they train someone to do it, but make sure that you have somebody that's owning that. If you're doing it through a payroll system, make sure you have an owner for that on the other side as well to verify that. I really don't want you to find out you have a problem by going through an audit. So make sure that you go through your files. Be proactive. Don't be reactive. This is exactly, again, the type of stuff that I see often in businesses and that I work on with businesses. So if you don't have the bandwidth or are, unsure if you're doing this correctly, please reach out. An HR audit could be really beneficial for you and your business. So hopefully next time I have something more exciting to chat about instead of these fear-mongering updates from the government. It's not my favorite, right? I like to keep things positive. But again, I'm not like this is negative. I'm here to help you be proactive, not reactive. I don't want to put out fires. I'd rather just make sure everyone is functioning correctly. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You built something real like your business, so make sure you're protecting it the best you can. Until next time.